Hello there. During surprise visits to London and Paris, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asked the West for more weapons. I talked about this already at noon, but I bring some new parts in today. His country's army needs fighter jets in particular to win the defensive battle against Russia, said Zelensky on his second trip abroad since the war began almost a year ago in London on Wednesday. There, he met Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as well as King Charles III. And in the evening, Zelensky landed in Paris for a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The dinner in the Élysée Palace should also have been about further support for Ukraine, but they already said it in advance in Paris. The Ukrainian president continued to Brussels after meeting Scholz and Macron. An EU summit there began today. Ukraine hopes to join the European Union very soon, but the negotiations haven't even started yet. Macron and Scholz had already promised Zelensky support during a joint visit to Kiev in June. And Great Britain is one of Kiev's closest supporters in the defense fight against Russia, but the guest from Kiev did not receive a firm commitment to deliver fighter jets there either. Sunak later only said that he asked the Ministry of Defense to check the availability of jets. But it's a long-term solution, they said in Downing Street. And Zelensky, on the other hand, made it clear that he wanted London to play a leading role when it came to fighter jets. He thanked in advance for capable English aircraft. At a press conference in the evening, Sunak announced that the British Challenger 2 main battle tanks, which had already been confirmed, are to be deployed in Ukraine as early as March. I mentioned this at noon. And longer-range missiles are also being discussed to help Kiev protect civilians. And as I said, Zelensky really emphasized the importance of missiles, for example, to ward off drones. Ukraine is now to receive 14 modern Leopard 2 main battle tanks from Germany. And London also announced that it would expand the training program for Ukrainian soldiers. According to Sunak, fighter pilots and Marines will also be trained there in the future. And this should also enable Ukrainian pilots to fly NATO fighter jets, which should fuel the debate about possible deliveries of such machines from Western countries. And hundreds of people gathered in Westminster Hall, the oldest part of Parliament in London, for a speech by Zelensky in front of Parliament. The president thanked them emphatically for the British arms deliveries and was confident about the outcome of the war. We know freedom will win, and we know that this victory will change the world. It will be a victory that it took the world a long time. In a government statement in the German Bundestag, Chancellor Scholz called on the Allies to unite when it comes to arms deliveries and warned of a bidding competition. Cohesion within our alliance is our greatest asset, warned the Social Democrat politician. What harms our unity, on the other hand, is a public outbidding competition along the lines of battle tanks, submarines, airplanes, who wants more? What harms are pithy domestic political statements and criticism of partners and allies on the open stage. Yeah, he has to say that he was the one being criticized all the time. It was recently decided here in Germany that modern Leopard 2 main battle tanks should be delivered, and the former Ukrainian ambassador to Germany, Andrei Melnik, is now also demanding fighter jets and warships. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius recently stated that an additional 1.1 billion euros were spent on the spring package, which includes equipment, Patriot systems, bridge-laying armored vehicles, and Marder infantry fighting vehicles. So far, the federal government has provided aid of around 3.3 billion euros. But what does that mean exactly? 3.3 billion worth of armaments sold to Ukraine? Or does the federal government pay for it and just give it to Ukraine? Many are currently wondering how these deliveries are financed at all. And that's why I made the second video today. Because there are 5 different official ways the federal government is supporting Ukraine with arms. The first is from the stocks of the Bundeswehr. As happened in the case of the wonderful 5,000 helmets, the delivery may come from the Bundeswehr stocks. The Ministry of Defense decides whether the material can be handed in. Because the risk with this form of support is that the deliveries tear a hole in the Bundeswehr stocks. That could weaken Germany's defense capability. According to a spokesman for the federal government, Ukraine will not pay any money for arms deliveries from the Bundeswehr stocks. And then there are secondly orders from German armaments companies. Ukraine is free to order weapons from German armaments companies and pay for them themselves. However, these arms exports must be approved by the Federal Security Council, as is usual in the case of arms exports. There have been repeated reports that Ukraine is also using this route to defend itself against Russian superiority. In the overall view, however, the deliveries have not been significant so far. The first delivery of an order for 100 Panzerhaubitze 2000 with a total value of 1.7 billion euros should not take place until 2024. And third, there's a compensation deliveries by the so-called ring exchange. In a ring exchange, a country gives Ukraine military equipment and receives a replacement from another country. The weapons provided are usually of a simple Soviet design, which they can operate and use immediately without any special training. Slovenia, for example, supplied Soviet T-72 tanks to Ukraine. And in return, Germany delivered the first of 15 Leopard 2 main battle tanks last December to Slovenia. However, these do not come from the stocks of the Bundeswehr, but are to be provided directly by the armaments industry. And fourth, there's the pot of aid. Kiev can request that the armaments deliveries be paid for from the so-called training aid pot. This pot has been around since 2016. It is intended to support partner countries in times of crisis. At the beginning of last year, it was planned to invest 225 million euros in this upgrading aid. With the war in Ukraine, the federal government decided to increase the budget by a good 1.7 billion euros to 2 billion euros. Most of the funds are for Ukraine, and in 2023 it should be 2.2 billion euros. According to a spokesman for the federal government, no applications for this aid have been rejected so far. The cost of weapons, which indirectly benefit Ukraine through a ring exchange, are also paid from this pot. And last but not least, there is the EU pot of the European Peace Facility. All EU countries pay into this pot of the European Peace Facility. It was set up in 2021. This financing instrument is intended to cover all EU foreign policy measures with military and defense implications within the framework of EU foreign and security policy. As early as February 2022, just a few days after the start of the war, the EU provided Ukraine with 500 million euros, and just 1 month later the budget for Ukraine was increased to 1 billion euros. With this money, EU member states can get money back if they supply arms to Ukraine. With around 713 million euros coming from the pot of the first pot, Germany pays in the most money. And according to a spokeswoman for the federal government, the share will be around 845 million euros by 2027. Germany can also have costs reimbursed though. For the most part, the federal government finances the arms deliveries to Ukraine. Therefore, Ukraine pays nothing for most of German armaments. And I know it was a lot about Germany, but I am from Germany and I'm talking here from a German perspective on British politics. And in case of the Ukraine war, I once wanted to show how this financing works. And that's of course why I took the German example in this video. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.